Our next presenter is Joe Van Haecke. He's an English teacher at North High School and is a member of the Comedy Experiment, a comedy improv troupe here in Des Moines, and is a father and a husband. A lifelong learner who's just grateful and blessed. Please welcome Joe. Wow, he's fine.
Good evening. I was 26 when my mom died from injuries sustained in a car accident. My father and her were driving back from Colorado when they ran into the back of a snowplow. Now my mom had been asleep and put the seat back and slid underneath the seat belt and sustained internal injuries. That was over 17 years ago. Before then, I never really had to deal with grief. Little did I know that that was the day I joined the club. Now, I know that tonight is supposed to be about our passion, and it's not that grief is a passion per se, but over the years I've had time to provide a little thoughts about that, and I'd like to share some with you. As I mentioned, to begin with, grief is like a club. It's not one you really want to belong to, but it's not an exclusive club by any means. The thing about the club is, I don't feel we do a good job learning or teaching, or more importantly, talking about grief. I know you can take a class or go see a professional, but at the time, my time, I didn't know about that. Fortunately, 8 years later, I found Amanda the Panda in Camp Amanda. What I think is wrong is that a lot of what we learn about how to deal with reactions, such as somebody dying, we learn through TV or movies. The problem is, rarely do we see the full effects of someone close to us dying. We don't get to see the club. Ross's high school friend may die, and we see flashbacks of the good times, get some laughs, maybe some tears, and everything's fine after 22 minutes. Next week, he's still on a break with Rachel, and everything is back to, quote, normal. But that's not how the club works. Once you're in, we're in. Non-members don't realize that next week, or next month, or next year, or even 17 years later, we still feel the effects of grief. TV or movies don't show us what to do with these feelings now. Now, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross proposes there are 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Now, if you're not part of the club, you might think, well, you work through these 5 stages and grieving is over. I know 17 years ago I felt that, but, I was thinking, once I make it through the process, I thought everything will be fine. I'll be fine, finish grieving. I felt them in different degrees at different times. For example, I remember doing a lot of bargaining. I thought to myself, if I could just fire up my flux capacitor and go back in time and tell my mom before she got in the car, fall asleep if you must, but please, whatever you do, don't put the seat down. Once I realized bargaining is not getting anywhere, I thought, okay, next, I can check that. Check that off my list. It's like I had a list of things that I needed to do. Well, one of the unwritten rules of the club is checklists don't mean squat. Another thing I found is I got angry. I was angry at God, at life, at my dad. But what surprised me the most was my anger at my mom herself. How dare she leave me here? I wasn't married. I hadn't started a family. I wasn't ready to visit and go through life without her. And yet she got up and left me? How dare she do that? Oh, it took me a long time to accept that it was okay to be angry. These feelings that we feel when someone dies are okay. And even if it surprises you, that's all right, because membership has its surprises. So anyway, there's this 5-stage process, and we hear that and think, okay, well, he's gone through the 5 steps. He's okay now, whatever okay may be. But that's the thing, see, you never get over grief. It just becomes part of us. And the first rule of the club is, hey, guess what? You're in the club. Now, non-club members have a hard time realizing that or understanding that. I actually had a former girlfriend of mine say to me once, it's been like 5 years. Aren't you over that yet? Well, no, I'm not over that yet. I can't get out of the club. Grief becomes a part of us, and we learn how to deal with it on a daily basis and carry it along with us. Each of us will deal and experience it differently. There's no right or wrong way about it. We don't get over grief. As I mentioned, it becomes part of us. But the great thing about the club is we all have some shared experience. And that shared experience makes the club strong and supportive. As a club member, I've come to envision grief as two things. One is like a bucket inside of you. When you join the club and grief first appears, that bucket is full and overflowing. Then, as time goes by, it fills slower and slower. But sometimes it gets so full again and overflows, and it expresses itself in different ways. Why am I so stressed this week? Why am I not dead? Why am I grumpy? Oh, I'm missing Mom. My grief bucket's full. At other times, I feel grief is like a random just spasm, and I have a good friend that calls them grief spasms, in fact. A grief spasm comes out of nowhere and is completely unexpected. It can be something small or large, or something big that triggers it. For example, one time I was driving around Des Moines and I saw a company put up a privacy fence. And I felt this punch in my gut and this grief spasm, and I cried for 5 or 10 minutes because it reminded me of a conversation my mom and I had had 10 years before that about my dad putting up a privacy fence and how Dad and I couldn't do it together because my dad would much rather hire some professionals to do it. And there will come a time in your life where someone that you know joins the club. If you're not part of the club, it can be difficult to know what to say. 8 simple words that I can tell you. I'm sorry for your loss. How are you doing? And now, the other thing that I found is a lot of people find random things to associate with whoever they've lost. For me, it's a cardinal. Whenever I see a red cardinal, I think of Mom. I don't know why. She had nothing to do with cardinals, but it just comes to me. And I always feel that that's her speaking to me. Now, is that a coincidence? Maybe. But don't take that away from me, because the club doesn't care. If you want to be cynical, that's fine. We don't mind. And as I've had the unfortunate remembrance of being reminded about the club so often in the past few weeks, eventually all of us are going to be a member. And I just want you to know that we have a shared experience, and those of us that are already in the club will be waiting for you, and we'll listen.